Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and welcome back. I'm sorry I've been MIA this week, as you might hear from my voice. I did have a cold on Monday, and I've had to take the rest of the week to kind of recover from that. I don't have the the health of youth anymore, it seems. So today I'm probably only going to do this video, but it'll be a nice and easy one with very much a favorite of mine. And then next week we'll definitely see a few more videos, including on Wednesday you can watch me play Commander on a stream on another streamer's platform. But I'll talk more about that next week. And in the meantime, we're going to be looking at a Massacre Girl deck. This deck comes from Don't Care, or let's just call them Deck Builder, who says, the commander is pretty wacky, but I tried to make it work with creatures and effects that makes you mitigate the commander's ability, granting your board the ability to survive your board wipes. The deck is slow, mono black, it lacks artifact and enchantment removal. Give it your touch to make it feel okay-ish. And in terms of restrictions, they said no 2-card combos that do not synergize with the main game plan, the commander. Absolutely. We'll see what we can do, and before we get into it, this is a nice reminder that you can go to the video description to find the form to submit your own deck so that I can make a video on your deck list. And if you would like your deck to be the next deck I work on and make a video about, well, there's a link to that as well. Finally, if you'd like to take a look at this Massacre Girl list as I chat, get the London look, as it's called, please let me, go click that link and take a look. And what I was going to say is I have a bit of a question before we go any further. Maybe I'll ask this again when we have our next kind of channel look, but do people prefer for me to read out the cards that I am suggesting or looking at? Now it will make the videos a little longer, but I am cognizant that some people probably listen to these videos and not watch them. So if that's something you care about, please comment below, and if not, I'll ask it again sometime soon. But all that aside, let's take a look at the deck itself and our commander. Who is Massacre Girl and why is she the head of our mono black commander deck? Well, Massacre Girl is a 5-mana 4/4 human assassin in black. She has Menace, and she says, whenever she enters the battlefield, each other creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Whenever a creature dies this turn, excuse me, each creature other than Massacre Girl gets -1/-1 until end of turn. If you've ever played Hearthstone and you played the card Defile, this is very similar to that. It is a chain reaction that when Massacre Girl comes out, she starts giving -1/-1 triggers over and over and over again. And as a nice little bonus to that, this means that she doesn't do this to herself, and she cleans up token strategies. She cleans up a lot of incidental strategies. As long as there's enough creatures on the board, she should be able to do something. It's interesting because she is kind of a board clear in the command zone, and the deck itself has a lot of really fun ways to take advantage of her. So let's take a look at the deck itself. And I want to point out that the deck builder had some really cool ideas on how to deal with her ability. And what she wanted, or what they wanted, was that the these Venom Crawler style effects, we're going to look at a lot of these, Swarm of Bloodfries, Vogar, and Harvester of Souls. All of these cards say whenever a creature dies, there is a +1/+1 counter added. Now, momentarily, I wonder, yes, it's a delayed trigger. So, let's see. Creatures that die while Massacre Girl's triggered ability is on the stack won't cause the delayed triggered ability to trigger. So, I think becomes 0 as Massacre will resolve, remain on the battlefield just until the delayed. Okay, all right, perfect. So I needed a moment to figure out that this doesn't just take over all of the triggers. So though it's 2 different triggers, it is written as 1 trigger. So every time a creature dies, Massacre Curl's next trigger will be on the stack, so things will resolve. So all of these creatures that will gain a +1/+1 counter will gain that counter every time a creature dies. That's my understanding. And my cold, addled brain is thinking this is exactly the kind of thing that we want to happen. So, with that in mind, we're going to see what cards work with the deck and what cards don't work with the deck. Sorry, I realized I kind of went in a circle. I like how this deck is using +1/+1 counters, creatures that grow off of deaths, Sadistic Glee and Eternal Thirst, and Blade of the Bloodchief effects to make the most off of their opponent's creatures dying. What I'm going to suggest in a few of my additions is we're going to find some cards that benefit from our creatures dying as well. This deck also has a large collection of creatures that don't mind dying. Nether Trader, Reassembling Skeleton, and Bloodghast are all creatures that come back from the graveyard, and creatures like Dog Detective do that as well, just a little more clumsily. Not that they're bad, and obviously all of these creatures having 1 health is also very, very important because that starts the chain of Massacre Curl. So let's take a look at the curve. The curve is really nice. It goes a bit longer than I would like with 5 cards at 6 mana, which feels a little high. So we'll take a bit of a look at that. And then a 7th, a 7 mana card and a 9 mana card. And I don't know if we have the ramp that I would like. Otherwise, the deck looks really good. And so let's take a look at the cards that I think stick out at me that could be cut. So looking through the creatures, I do really like the creature collection. I feel like Junji, the Midnight Sky, kind of stands out as being a strange inclusion, though they are a very strong dragon with a really strong death ability. At the same time, it feels a little off theme of the deck. They kind of belong in their own deck, in their own kind of sacrifice deck, and less so like a, I'm going to wipe the board with my commander and 5 creatures will die, so Junji will die, feels a bit clumsy. In addition, Junji is also the same mana cost as our commander, which isn't ideal, so I think this is something we can lose for sure. Next, looking at our higher mana creatures, I generally like a lot of them. I think one of the things is that our 6-drops are all kind of the same card with extra text. All of these creatures care about when your opponent's creatures die, and they benefit with an additional effect. So let's take a look. Harvester of Souls is whenever a non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. I think this is the strongest one by far and should stick for sure. Obnixilis punishes your opponents for tutoring and then grows in size. I would say this is probably the second strongest one, and I would keep it for sure because the ability to force opponents, because whenever they search their library, they sacrifice a creature and lose 10 life. That's really, really good. I don't think there's a lot of meaningful ways to force your opponents to, search their library. That won't be like, I don't know, there's the tutor where both players tutor to the top of their deck for 1 mana. That could be an option, but I don't want to go all in on this. I think the soft power of this card is strong enough and we don't need to go any further. And then we're left with Patron of the Vein, which destroys a creature and exiles the creatures that die, and Haunt of the High Tower, which triggers it forces discards on attack, and it actually triggers on cards going to the graveyard, as opposed to creatures dying. Which reminds me a lot of Vulturous Zombie. Actually, I should click this so for those who watch, they can see it. They remind me a lot of Vulturous Zombie, I feel like that's the stronger version of that. This is the stronger version of that card. But between the two, if you had to pick, I think Patron of the Vein is a little stronger. The ability to exile the creatures your opponents that die from your opponent's side is really, really strong. and the fact that on ETB a creature is destroyed, making this immediately a 5/5, I think this is a much stronger card. And as much as I do really like the Haunt of a Hightower, because I think it's a very, very cool card, I think it's just like it's like what, the 5th 6-mana card or something like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, not counting anything else. Yeah, Liliana is the last one. It's the 6th 6-mana card, or the 5th 6-mana card, and I think it's just a little too weak at that mana cost. I think if you really want to keep it, I don't think it's the worst. I think we might think of other reanimation techniques to kind of get it. You are playing a lot of ramp, and I think that could be something worth considering. But that being said, I think it's close, and if you had to cut one, it would be the Haunt of Hightower. Liliana Dreadhorde General is the other 6-mana card, and she's very, very... Ooh, I'm sorry. I have not closed that sound. Liliana is just very, very good in a deck like this, and so I am not going to suggest that we get rid of her at all. All right, let's move on to our sorceries. Of our sorceries, I notice you are playing Feed the Swarm, which is an answer to enchantments. It is the best one the color has, and it is nice and easy. I think you noted that black just doesn't really answer artifacts and enchantments well, and that's fine. I think sometimes people look at the limitations of certain colors as something that needs to be fixed, but I don't think that's necessarily true. I think you can just kind of be fine with it, right? Their decks will not beat everything, right? This deck has a really hard time with a Rest in Peace effect, because once that Rest in Peace effect happens, death triggers no longer happen, and Massacre Girl loses all of her power. Is that the worst thing? I don't know. I think there's only so much you can do to play around that, and if your opponents are tutoring for Rest in Peace against you, well, I mean, I guess that's what's happening, right? And there's not much to be done here. I think that's fine, and the Feed the Swarm's enough. I think there are 1 or 2 other enchantment destruction spells in black. I think they're all the other ones are all sacrifice and enchantment. Actually, I do know there was a new one just printed in Wilds of Eldraine, and I think it's 5 mana to destroy an enchantment, which is a lot. So I will leave that up to you. If you are feeling that you are being beaten by, a lot of enchantments that are, using Rest in Peace effects, then you might actually want to play, 2 or 3 of these effects, or tutors to get them. But I really don't think that's really where you want to be. I think sometimes you just got to take the L and understand that your black death trigger deck is kind of defeated by those effects. Like, I played a lot of Aristocrats decks, and though most of them will contain white or green for enchantments, for enchantment destruction, there is a limit. Once Rest in Peace is on the battlefield, I can fight as much as I want to kind of get the get the right cards out to stop them, to get rid of this Rest in Peace effect. But at a certain point, I just lose, right? And I think that's fine. So that's the advice I would give. I will note, I see Emergency Weld here. I feel like this is just a little too cute. I do get the idea that it creates the 1/1, which will start off Massacre Girl's effect, so that it'll at least be a -2/-2, which is usually all you need to start kind of to basically wipe the board. But I think it's still just kind of okay. I think if you really want something like this, I think these 2 effects should be divided, because you'll get better versions of both effects. If you want to create 1/1s, you can grab yourself Bitter Blossom. If you want to bring cards back from the graveyard to your hand or reanimate them, you'll have much better options. So this card just feels like a, card that is not greater than the sum of its parts, and we don't really want that in a deck like this. Rise of the Dark Realms, I'm not going to be too hard on it, because we know why this card is here. This is the premium black, win condition. We see this ability stapled on a number of cards, from Liliana cards, I think Liliana Vess among a few others, have versions of this card. I believe she has, in that Planeswalker deck, she had a named card for her that gave this ability, if I remember correctly. And even Sheoldred, the Saga Sheoldred, has this ability herself. So I do get why it's here. It's a really fun card. It's a card I enjoy casting. I just don't feel we have the ramp to get to it. So I'm not going to say take it out. What I would say is maybe consider the alternatives. Mainly Sheoldred, if you can budget for her, would be the best version of this spell. But in the end, I'll leave it to you. It is a very, very fun spell. And looking at this list, I've been thinking maybe I should build a Sheoldred deck myself with very much so a similar kind of idea. But let's move on. Looking at the instance, I'm very, very happy. We have a bunch of Feign Death effects. Maybe it's just because of when this deck was created, but at least one of these should be not dead yet, or which I can never quite remember. Hold on, I'm gonna step to my other desk, see if I have it out. And I don't seem like I do have the card out. I can never remember the exact text of that card of Not Dead Yet that that does the Feign Death effect from the new set. But I'll just... Not Dead After All, I found it. Not Dead After All should be one of these cards. I think it's a very, very strong version of this card, and I think you should definitely be playing it as one of your options. Probably over Supernatural Stamina. I think that's the easiest switch here, and so I think that would be the right one to do. Looking at the rest, Deadly Dispute is great. Reckoner's Bargain is okay, but not bad. But Rise of the Dreadmarn is a card that I have a hard time with. I think very often they print a card like this that says, you know, instant or flash creature, when this enters the battlefield, count the number of creatures that have died this turn, and then have X effect. And I've tried a lot of them throughout the years, and honestly, I'm never impressed by this effect. I find it's very situational, it's very clunky, especially because you need to hold up mana, have a board clear yourself, and or rely on someone else's board clear, and see how that goes. That being said, this is kind of the best place this effect goes. Massacre Curl is a board clear from your command zone. You can foretell this, so it only costs 1 black. And then, even then, I still really don't like it. Because one of the main things it says is non-token creatures that died this turn. And I wonder, let's see, where X is the number of... Let's see if we can find a better version. We'll go here, we're gonna type in where X is the number of creatures, and then we're gonna type in and put in black, and we're gonna see how many of these kinds of cards there are. And I guess I should have wrote, hold on, let's go back, died. There we go. So, the other two options, so I can see Liliana's Standard Bearer is 3 mana and says, draw X cards where X is the number of creatures that died under your control this turn. So that's the caveat here. I don't like that. But Spoils of Blood, a rather old card, it seems, 2014, says put 1 X Black Horror, where X, XX, where X is the number of creatures that died this turn. And I'm going to be honest, I kind of like this one more. Because yes, in a way, we are pooling all of our resources into one creature as opposed to getting a bunch of tokens. I will say the fact that that Rise of the Dreadmarn does not count. It does not count the number of it doesn't count token creatures, is a really big problem in situations where Massacre Girl shines, right? Think of when Massacre Girl, we already looked at a card that creates a token for you to kill with Massacre Girl, making it good, like that's part of the power of the card. And when token players are in play, my goodness, does Massacre Girl really carry her weight. And so for Rise of the Dread Marn to be not as good in the moments that she's very good is kind of a problem. I also will note that foretelling this card isn't free. You know, we tend to look at foretelling as this kind of really sneaky, fun mechanic, which only happens the first time because the majority of decks only have one foretell card, so everyone figures out what it is. But, you know, the fact that we're still paying 3 for this ability is kind of rough. Whereas Spoils of Blood is always 1 black mana, it always works. It's really easy to hold up. You don't need to foretell it and have your opponents see it coming. And yeah, it works really well with our commander and other people's board clears. I'd be really, really happy with this ability. I think this works even better with a board clear, because with your opponent's board clears, because then you get to untap with it and get away with having a giant creature. And notably, your opponents tend to board clear when there's a lot of tokens. So I would like Spoils of Blood. Is it a very big difference? I don't think so, but I think it's enough that I would personally make that change. All right, let's look at artifacts. I see Glasses of Urza, which is tap to look at target player's hand. It's not the Sunglasses of Urza, which if I remember is that uncard. Let me make sure. Oh no, that's a real one too. That's funny. Sunglasses of Urza allows you to use white mana as white or red mana. What a silly card. Let's go back to Glasses of Urza, which is look at target player's hand. And I'm going to say, unless there's a very big meme of this in your play group, don't play this card. This is, how do I put this? This is like a crutch. And there's not a lot of crutches in Magic, but this is one of them. It is an ability that you need to build the skill to not need how to do. Not need to use. Sorry, that's cursed with a cold thinking. So think of this, there's also another card, 1 blue, I believe, that makes everyone, you know, reveal their hands at all times. There's 1 blue peak, where you get to look at your opponent's hand and draw a card. At least the peak and Gitaxian Probe are better because they draw you a card, but cards that only reveal your opponent's hand is stopping you from developing a skill that you need to develop so you don't have to use cards like this. And that skill is understanding what your opponents have in hand. Now you might say, but Cursed Deck Builder, I have 3 opponents with 99 different cards in their decks. How am I supposed to figure out what's in their hands? It's impossible. Are you saying I should become a pro? That's not the case, right? Now, the majority of the games I play is in a 2-player 60-card format of Modern. And that's easier to do. You know, the decks have multiples. You're playing against decks that are probably tiered decks, so you know what's in them. But a lot of those techniques can apply in Commander. You can understand play patterns. It's more difficult, yes, when you have 3 opponents, but with 3 opponents, you have more opportunities to learn. For example, something a lot of people will start with is paying attention to the lands your opponents play. The way they play lands and the order they play lands is revealing to the cards they have in hand. If your opponent plays a tap land on turn 2, one can assume either they don't have any untapped lands or they don't have any turn 2 plays, right? If they turn 3 play an untapped land and then a turn and a 2-mana card, then you can kind of figure out what that sequencing was, right? They most likely didn't have a turn 2 play, and then, so they played their tap land, and then turn 3, they drew a turn 2 play, played an untapped land, and cast a turn 2 play. Now, it could have also been that they didn't have a third land a second land that's untapped. That's just more unlikely, and plus, if they didn't have a second untapped land, Like, it just doesn't make sense for them to not play another land, and if they didn't have a third land, they'd be sweating, and you'd notice that. Sorry, this example is getting too intense. I guess what I'm getting at is that I would implore you to put this card away and start trying to figure out your opponent's hands. And then when those games end, turn to your opponents and say, hey, at the start of the game, I really felt that you drew into a bunch of lands. Is that true? Or you could say, hey, I really noticed that you had a lot of interaction and not a lot of creatures. Is that true? Like, what were you waiting on? And those conversations will help you understand your opponent's hands and help you kind of suss out, as the kids would say, exactly what your opponents are playing at any given time. And once you have that, you can put away the Glasses of Urza. Sunglasses of Urza should definitely go in this deck because I'm sure the London look wears sunglasses. Okay, with that in mind, let's keep moving. Vat of Rebirth's great. A bunch of these cards are very good. Let's see. So, I like the rest of these. I think this is fine. I think Crowded Crypt... You know what? I'm going to let you play with this. I feel like it's close. I really don't like the fact that Crowded Crypt only grows in size as your own creatures die. Once again, I just want cards that trigger on all creatures, or at least to have a net positive effect. Because the thing with Crowded Crypt is you can play Crowded Crypt, and there's a lot of games you won't use the ability, right? You'll either lose, or it'll get destroyed, or the game just you win too quickly, among other things, or you just have too many things to play. Crowded Crypt is just not the kind of card you want. I find most of the time, but I can see how it's really, really good here. So I will leave it up to you to decide. Test it a while to find out. I think the rest of the deck is great. Grave Betrayal is a lot of mana, but is a very, very good card. I like it a lot more than Rise of the Dark Realms here, and I would very much recommend playing this, so I'm a fan. All right, so let's go into my additions. Actually, let's also see how long this video has been going. No, this has been good. Let's go into my additions. So, looking at this deck, you had asked me to kind of try to find the things to improve the deck. And the start of that I always look at is mana and card draw. And I feel like you have the mana, but I wouldn't mind a little more card draw. And with that in mind, I think I'm going to give you the full suite, because I don't think this is the kind of deck that's going to be too sad about having more card draw. You just have so many effects that work really well together that you always want to kind of have a full hand. Like, for example, if you're drawing into your Feign Death effects, but you don't have the creatures, it's going to be a little rough when you can't use that ability, or you can't use it on Massacre Girl to use her again. Especially not being able to reanimate your growing creatures, which is the main way you win the game. Like, just having the wrong combination of cards can make this deck a little rougher. So having a little more card draw is very much so nice. So I'm going to start with Sign in Blood. You are playing, Night's Whisper, but you're in mono black, so you get to play Sign in Blood with almost no downside. I don't know if you want to play both, but I would definitely play one of them. And Sign in Blood can at least be, it is at least sometimes player removal. So it's very, very rare, but technically should be considered. So Sign in Blood is a very good card and worth considering. After which, Read the Bones should definitely be in there. I can never stop advocating for this card. I think there's a lot of people very much so underestimate the power of just straight card draw. Read the Bones is 3 mana, scry 2, draw 2, and since scry is usually worth half a card, it is basically draw 3. It's just a very, very powerful card. If you scry both cards to the bottom, you basically look at 4 cards, which is really, really strong. And this card just keeps getting reprinted, right? Just constantly. And every time it does, I really recommend, if you go to your LGS and they have a bunch of, these at common, just pick up a few. Whenever you play black, you'll be very, very happy to do so. Likewise, Greed is another card. I just picked up 4 Greeds for my LGS for 40 cents each, and I am very, very happy. If you're in black and you have the means to play this card, I think you should play it. The ability to just turn your extra mana into card draw is really good. And a lot of people, you know, we do know that 1 card for 1 mana is a pretty good deal. It's not the best deal. You know, I really like drawing more cards than mana spent. And obviously cards like Necropotence or Rhystic Study really stick out as cards that draw you very, very large quantities of cards for the mana you put into it. Greed's 1 for 1 and 2 life is a really good deal, and you're not often going to be pretty sad about it, especially when you find yourself in those games where you've ramped and then you have nothing to do with that, right? Excuse me. All right, Phyrexian Arena is the last one. I kind of did this out of order. I don't think you need this one as much here, but the thing is Phyrexian Arena's kind of steady, the steady card draw effect of it can be really, really nice. Very soon, this card is going to start going up in cost, so be sure to pick them up. You know, these things only last for so long. Whenever we have a reprint, eventually they do rise back up in price. And Phyrexian Arena is very much so a $5 card, so if you can get them for a few dollars, you absolutely should take advantage of that. Then one more card draw that I think is worth considering, but I'm less down for, is Midnight Reaper. It has too many ifs, right? Like, the creature needs to be a non-token creature, and it needs to be your creature. So I don't really love it, but I would feel bad not stating it. So I'll leave it up to you to decide. It's close. I think I probably wouldn't put it in here, but just having even more card draw and a creature that can die from Massacre Girl to continue the chain is not a bad idea. All right, looking at cards that work well as you know, elements that make your deck go a little more consistently. Or let's start with like pseudo finishers, actually. Bastion of Remembrance is a card that I think can be straight replacing Emergency Weld, because it has that text that we like, where it creates its own 1/1 token to start the Massacre Girl chain. So Bastion of Remembrance is a Blood Artist effect, I guess a Zulaport Cutthroat effect. So each of your opponents, whenever one of your creatures dies, they lose a life. And I think this is really, really good. It doesn't say non-token, which I really like. It does say your creature, which isn't great. But when you get Massacre Girl out and you have, you know, 4 or 5 creatures to die, that's pretty good. You know, all of a sudden you are draining your opponents by quite a few cards. Remember that this you can basically multiply the number by 3 to figure out how much damage you've done. If you have 4 creatures that die, all of a sudden you've done, you know, 12 damage. That's respectable, right? And this works as a really nice passive damage throughout the game while you smash with your really big creatures. So I do particularly like this. Now, a card that's a little more expensive, but just got reprinted is Grave Pact. I think it just got reprinted twice, right? Yeah, with this art as well. Let me find my art. This is the art I have that I really like. Grave Pact is a very, very good card. It is deceptively strong. There is a lot of cards around this price range that I think sometimes are a little, let's say, overvalued for what they actually do, and Grave Pact is not one of these cards. I would very easily say that. One second, sorry. I would very easily say that this card carries its weight really, really cleanly. You play Grave Pact, and then if you have Viscera Seer out to sacrifice one of your creatures, immediately you'll get the trigger. And if not, I mean, just play your deck out. Just, you know, attack into your opponents. Just do the things you want to do. And if no one can answer Grave Pact in time, you will completely decimate the board. This works really well as a Massacre Girl replacement, that they do very similar things, but also in tandem, it is an insane card. when you have them both on the field, Massacre Girl on ETB gets to skip numbers, right? If you have a 1/1 or someone has a 1/1 and then everything else is like 3 or above or something a lot higher than that, this will work, right? So Massacre Girl kills the 1/1. Everything else gets 1/1 again. Nothing dies. But then Grave Pact triggers, and each of your opponents sacrifice a creature. That's 3 more triggers of Massacre Girl on the stack, and all of a sudden, she is now completely cleaning up the board. Even if the 1/1 was your only other creature, right? Very, very strong. This will put you very far ahead. And unfortunately, the only big downside is just like everything else, and just like the rest of the deck, it does lose to Rest in Peace effects, but with a card this strong, what can you do? Then, before we go into my next strong thing, I want to put a few more removal options or ideas. And what I want to talk about is Innocent Blood effects, but mainly Plaguecrafter effects. So I'm going to show all of them at once. I want to show Plaguecrafter, Demon's Disciple, and then if you want to play more, you've got Fleshbag Marauder. So Plaguecrafter being the best, Demon's Disciple being the second best, I believe. I believe that's still the case. I know there's a 4 mana that says non-token, but I don't think we have another 3 mana card. These cards are just really, really good for applying pressure while you are building towards Massacre Girl. Now the thing is like, the reason you might say, Cursed, I want the battlefield to be filled with creatures. Why would I be taking them off like 3 at a time? I think that's a fair point. But one of the things I really like Plaguecrafter on is Plaguecrafter effects are really good when there's not a lot of tokens. And if you notice, Massacre Girl is really good when there is. So they complement each other really, really well by doing the opposite things. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to set up Massacre Girl and your opponents are wise, so they're only playing 1 or 2 very large creatures, they're playing their 7/7s, 6/6s, really big creatures that Massacre Girl with the board state can't hope to get to. Plaguecrafter effects are really, really good because now they don't have the tokens or the smaller creatures to sacrifice. So Plaguecrafter can be really, really effective at taking out their commanders, taking out their really big creatures, etc., etc., while being, generally a 3-for-1, right? And that's really, really nice. That's not even including the fact that you can sacrifice, Bloodghast, Reassembling Skeleton, the like, and still be up a card because that creature will come back from the dead. You get to keep the Plaguecrafter. I really, really like that. The last thing I'll say is what I always say about these effects is these effects work really well in multiples because you can keep the pressure on your opponent's turn after turn, but I don't think that's where this deck wants to be. I think if I were you, I'd play Plaguecrafter, Demon's Disciple, and leave it at that. Having 2 creatures that work really, really well when your commander isn't working. Another thing, obviously, that doesn't need to be said, but these cards also work through a Rest in Peace. So once again, they work really well when Massacre Girl just isn't at her best, right? And I really, really do like that. All right, the last card I want to suggest is Buried Alive. So this card is a little more expensive than I usually suggest, at being closer to like, let's say $7, $8 American, depending on the version you can get. Graveborns are cheap, but they're foil, so I personally don't like them. Buried Alive is very, very strong in this deck. And the reason is that you cast Buried Alive and you grab Bloodghast, you grab Nether Trader, and you grab Reassembling Skeleton, and you throw them all directly into your graveyard. I'm ignoring Reanimate right here. I'm just saying grab your creatures that come back from the dead and throw them into the graveyard, right? Now this can change, of course, if you have other creatures that you want to be reanimated, or if you add other creatures that come back from the dead. I think you get to decide what level that is. But like, even if you went Buried Alive, Bloodghast, Reassembling Skeleton, like that's really all you need to do, right? Whatever that last card is last creature is up to you. You can put something in you hope to reanimate later, but all of a sudden you have your sacrifice outlets, you have your your sacrifice, your fodder, and you have things to die to Massacre Girl that you can bring back at your leisure. Obviously, Bloodghast being much stronger because of the because it's just a landfall trigger, but still, I think you'd be really happy with that card. With one cast, you are set up to start going off. And with that, I will end this assist video. I really love Massacre Girl, and I really like the direction that you're going in. The changes I'm suggesting is to take out a few of the higher mana cards, maybe replace Rise of the Dreadmar with something else, get rid of the glasses, and then start with card draw. A few more card draw spells, especially those that work through a Rest in Peace effect, are going to be really helpful. After which, I think if you can put the money aside, Grave Pact and Buried Alive are really strong additions to your deck. Bastion of Remembrance has just been reprinted, so it is particularly cheap. Take advantage of that. And then finally, this is just my call, but I think Plaguecrafter, at least Plaguecrafter, is a very nice addition here, which will go very far because it just represents attacking on an axis that your commander is weak on. I hope this deck assist video was helpful to you, and if you'd like to submit to me another draft of this deck or of any deck, you can find the link to the form in the video description below. And if you'd like the deck you send to be the next deck I work on, well, there's a link to that as well. In the meantime, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, do the whole YouTube thing, I'd be very grateful, as the channel is still growing and I'm so happy with the support we've received. I love Massacre Girl. I'm really happy to see her here, and I want to see more decks like this. I will also note, obviously people really like Massacre Girl because she has not one, but now 2 anime alternate arts. I think that's very funny. Clearly she's a character that a lot of people like, and I think she's gonna come back in the murder mystery. I think she'd be a really fun character there, so I would be very excited to see that. All right, thanks for the deck and good luck.